5 years and 10 days ago, on the 6th of January 2021, a day of reckoning with no equals, on a level like no other war or event that had ever occurred on the Dream SMP, dawned on every single SMP member of the server. L'Manberg's Doomsday War, or simply the Doomsday War, and the third great Dream SMP War. For the small majority that understood the tense situation, this would not just be the fight of their lives, but an impossible battle like no other they had ever fought in or been through. For the main aggressors determined to see their plans come to fruition, this isn't just also the fight of their lives, it's to achieve everything they had so long desired when others held them back, and even now when the entire server marches against them. For the rest of the SMP members, whether aligning to one specific side or making themselves their own belligerents in the storm that was brewing, this day spelled doom for the nation-state called L'Manberg. It has been, at the time, 161 days, the 29th of July 2020, since the land around the once simple hot dog, definitely no drugs Camar van had declared itself independent from the Dream SMP. And it has been 51 days, the 16th of November 2020, since the Manberg regime has been toppled and the land of emancipated free men was blown up for the second time. But the clock had finally struck zero for the still alive Tommy and Tubbo and their L'Manberg as the inevitable end drew near. Some citizens of L'Manberg who had been part of the nation from the start had then either abandoned, disappeared, or even sought betrayal as their nation faces the biggest existential threat since the first Great Dream SMP War. Both support coming from dozens of members from the rest of the server. Tommy and Tubbo didn't think, but only hoped, that they stood a fighting chance against the opposition, who may as well be considered as gods battling puny mortals. This fateful day was the moment Dream had been waiting for since Wilbur Soot told the Green Boy to suck it when L'Manberg was allowed its de facto independence from the greater Dream SMP. He had never let go the plan of one day reclaiming L'Manberg as it stands as everything he despised, the defiance of others challenging his will and power, the bad apple that infested and destabilized his server beyond recognition from its humble beginnings, especially with many other factions and countries declaring their independence. And most importantly, it's the bastion where his biggest enemies use as a safe haven to thrive and to cause more ruin. In the eyes of Dream, there could only be one result after this war. L'Manberg delenda est. L'Manberg must be destroyed. This unavoidable conflict had always been on a collision course with Technoblade and Philza Minecraft. From day one of joining the Dream SMP, all that Technoblade was known for is violence, war, and a tool for killing. During the Poctobia vs. Manberg War, he had been the driving force, the spear tip that enabled the former L'Manbergians to reclaim their land and nation from the infamous democratically elected but tyrannical dictator J-Schlatt, brushing aside all obstacles and enemies, which thus helped with the overthrow of the Manberg regime. However, he felt mistreated after the revolution, as all of his efforts had been ignored and forgotten immediately, as his former allies then declared the creation of a new government, right in front of the pigmen they had before called an ally. And who is the most powerful warrior anyone on the Dream SMP should be wary of, but super wary for any government establishing themselves right in front of this dangerous anarchist. With this vague casus belli, Technoblade fought against everyone on the server to prevent any new government rising from the ashes of L'Manberg, blown up by Wilbur Soot in spite of taking his nation back. Philza's first experiences on the Dream SMP wasn't clean-cut either. First joining the server right before Wilbur blew his nation into oblivion, he sought to preserve his son's nation and live peacefully in a new L'Manberg, one without conflicts. He and Techno sought for different ways of settling down in the post-war aftermath. Phil lived in L'Manberg to support its reconstruction and future prosperity, while Techno moved to a peaceful cabin far away in the northern Arctic lands. Despite they ran as far away from war as possible, war sprinted just as fast back to them. Techno was brought back to L'Manberg as a criminal who attacked his allies even when they're on the same side, and was sentenced to death by execution, while Filza was put under house arrest for colluding with Techno, both of whom saw in full display that power corrupts absolutely. It was an understandably valid case for justice, but going after the greatest warrior that had ever existed and his best friend was an enormous mistake for Tubbo and L'Manberg. An act in the eyes of Technoblade and supported by Filza could only be paid back in revenge, which means only one thing: the government must be annihilated. L'Manberg delenda est. With all the reasons and material wealth to go to war, Dream, Filza, and Technoblade went all out against L'Manberg, along with anyone from the rest of the Dream SMP standing in their way of revenge and total destruction. Techno acted as a distraction as he and his hound army, hundreds of crossbreed wolves, fought off at least 8 people, all together trying to protect L'Manberg. Filza ran across the battlefield, spawning an army of withers to cause chaos and hinder L'Manberg's defenders from resisting effectively. And finally, Dream, who a few hours prior built a massive obsidian grid over L'Manberg, rained literal hell upon the defenders, with dispensers dropping hundreds of stacks of TNT at a continuous rate, exploding, destroying, and killing whatever player, mob, or structure that are within the blast radius. For Tommy, Tubbo, Quackity, and whoever still cared for and attempted to defend L'Manberg to the death, it felt like the end of the world. For Dream, Filza, and Technoblade, this is what L'Manberg deserves all along. It will be the best lesson to teach L'Manberg and the rest of the SMP when it's just a crater that descends all the way down to bedrock levels. Eventually, when the dust settles and the fighting died down, L'Manberg was gone. The most impactful and important nation in the history of the Dream SMP was nothing more than a pile of rubble, all left in ruin and destroyed. Tommy, Tubbo, Quackity, and Ghostbur, who was spared from the fighting because he wasn't there when battle started, gathered together to sing the L'Manberg national anthem one grand final time to say their goodbyes, with the third verse of the anthem left unsung as a sign of L'Manberg never rising ever again, but mostly because it was forgotten when the singing occurred. In the following days, Dream came back to the crater, what was once L'Manberg but had been then re-annexed back into the greater Dream SMP, to officially make the crater exploding all the way to reveal the bedrock below that can be seen from the surface. He also made a short video of him singing by L'Manberg, a parody song of the country's anthem, as a final spit on the country's grave, and officiate his final victory over the nation that had troubled him so long ago. The L'Manberg crater remained as it was ever since the Doomsday War, with it naturally, which just feels like terraforming, but that's not canon, with it naturally having the scars of war covered up, growing lush with greenery, and rushing waterfalls flooding the bottom of the crater, which is how it is still to this day. The country as we know it was gone, but so long as the name L'Manberg continues to be called out and echoed in our ears, the country we all know and love lives not just in memory, but in our hearts and minds. That was all that was left of L'Manberg for Tommy and Tubbo. In the following days, though, they would have to regather all their strength because their grand battle against Dream, the final disconfrontation, lies ahead to decide the fate of the Dream SMP after the consequential death and destruction of L'Manberg during the Doomsday War.